Hey, it's Julie Ziemelis, 365 Hawaii, 365 Group, Keller Williams Realty, and we are still creating content here for you today from the Home Expo. And right now what I have is a very, very smart man. It is Josh Montgomery, and he is with the Ohana Aina Association, and he actually he owns Guardwell Farms. And John is going to talk to us about a legislative issue that's coming up. Josh, I'm sorry, it's Josh Montgomery. See, my writing. But he is going to tell you guys about upcoming legislation that used to be called STVR, which is short-term vacation rental, and it's changed to TAR, Transient Accommodation Rental, yeah. And so this is a hot issue that's happening right now. He's going to give you some background on it. He's going to talk to you a little bit about what you can do. And we're giving him basically this space because as realtors, we believe in private property rights, and this definitely affecting private property rights. So Josh, tell us a little bit about what is going on with this legislation.
Sure. So in November, Councilor Heather Kimball proposed a piece of legislation that would significantly restrict the ability of the public to run accommodation rentals, not only as absentee owners, but in their own homes. And, we'd been involved in the industry for a number of years, and we actually, the only way that we're able to afford our home here in Hawaii is because we run a transient accommodation rental. So we bought a fairly sizable home when we moved here under the concept that my parents could live downstairs as they got older, and that we would live upstairs, and we did that throughout COVID. And at the end of that, my father passed, and my mother chose to go back to Phoenix. And in order for us to continue to make ends meet, it made sense for us to turn half of our home into a vacation rental. Mm-hmm. And that's really how we pay our bills, the expenses for being here in Hawaii. And when we read about this legislation, we became very concerned because right now it's 100% legal on the Big Island for you to take a room or an ohana or a tiny home on your property and to rent it as an accommodation rental, and there's very little regulation. The new steps that the county's taking would put severe restrictions on that, including preventing you from, for example, buying a home and having a long-term rental alongside a short-term rental. They also put pretty significant restrictions on your ability to do it on ag. And as we know, more than 95% of the land here on the Big Island is ag zone. Agriculture, yes. And so that creates some significant impediments for people who are running farm stay operations and homestay operations on the island. And we looked at it and realized that, unlike the hotel industry or the airline industry, individual vacation rental owners, we don't really have an association, right? We're not big companies that can pool money to have, lobbyists go and lobby on our behalf. We're all busy, right? Like we're running these operations ourselves. We've got kids and we don't have managers and accountants and overhead, all the overhead that a hotel has. And so we need a group of individual owners to represent us to local government. And so Chris and I chose to take a leadership position there, and we inherited a group from the folks who got organized the last time regulations came up, and have really worked to expand that message and to talk a little bit more with the public about what we do and why it's important.
Right, and it's a lot of people. Like you said, because we get people who call us all the time and say, the only way I can afford a house in Hawaii is if we get something with no Ohana. Right? Mm-hmm. And now we have to start saying it might not be what you think it's going to be in the future because they're thinking about changing the legislation, right? So you guys, when you're going to talk to the legislators, do you want them just to modify the bill, or is it something you want them to drop altogether? Where are you going to go with this?
Well, number one, they haven't done any research at all. None. No research, no studies. They've commissioned no independent analysis of the results of the last bill, which they passed 4 years ago, right? And the justification for the last bill was that it would improve the access to affordable housing here in Hawaii. And I don't know, I look around me. No. Yeah, do you say that improved access to affordable housing? No, it didn't. So, until they've actually done their homework and identified, number one, is it going to be effective at solving the affordable housing crisis, number one? What are the real costs going to be to families and to the local economy? We think it's premature to actually start proposing legislation. But if they do propose legislation, it should be in the context of quality research, right? Quality staff work, independent analysis, listening to the public, all of the steps you would take to get a good bill. If I go to build a house here in Hawaii, right, I got to go through this whole long process. I got to commission, studies on the history of the property and make sure that there are no human remains on it. I got to look for architectural features that need to be preserved. I got to do environmental impact studies. I mean, I have to do all this homework before I build a home. Why wouldn't you expect the county to do the same when they're going to impact the livelihoods of more than 7,000 families?
So 7,000 is kind of that's how many people have these Ohana units.
It's about
right
7,500 families here in Hawaii depend on this income in one form or another to make ends meet. And those are individual families. That's not individuals, right? Those families are 3 or 4 people. So you're talking about tens of thousands of people. And when they brought the legislation up, they claimed 2 reasons for bringing it up, right? The first was that they had had a series of complaints about vacation rentals, that they wanted to regulate it. And the second one was affordable housing. But when we asked them, how many complaints have you actually had? The answer for 2022 was 65 complaints. 65 complaints, right? There were 1,691,000 rental nights in 2022 of short-term vacation rentals on the island, and they got 65 complaints. That works out to a complaint rate of 0.00006%. Like it's almost a negligible rate. And as a result, they've kind of dropped that as the justification for the bill, and now they're talking about it in the context of affordable housing. But as you just pointed out, for many, many families here in Hawaii, the only way they can afford to live here in Hawaii and pay their rent is by renting an ohana or a bedroom in their home or a yurt or a tent out on ag. The affordability crisis, the obtainability crisis here on the island is being mitigated in many ways by this. And so if you outlaw it, what you're effectively doing is cutting the income of these families that are depending on this and making it harder for new families that are buying homes to make ends meet.
Right.
And so it's something that we really need to think about more carefully as a community before we push legislation through. And certainly we shouldn't do anything in a giant rush.
Right. So right now, the way that it's all set up, the county right now is getting public input, right? And they're looking at making this, if they're going to do this, how soon would they try and make this happen?
Well, they've claimed that they're going to do another public session on January 20th of 2023.
Just so you guys know, January 20th, you guys have a chance to actually do
but
this.
But it's not really a public input session. It's a broadcast, right? They're going to do a webinar, and they're going to tell us what they're going to do and why and how the government is coming to solve our problems for us. And when I look at what the steps that they're taking, I can't help but wonder if we as an industry are being scapegoated, right? That there's an affordable housing crisis here in Hawaii. And when you talk to builders, when you talk to people who actually build homes, if we were going to regulate the auto industry, who would you call, right? You'd call GM and you'd call Ford and you'd call, Tesla. If Elon, you just tweet Tesla, right? You'd tweet Elon. And you'd ask them, you'd say, how can we improve transportation? How can we get higher mileage on our cars? How can we improve safety? Like, you'd bring the automakers in, right? So when we're talking about affordable housing, the people that we should be having conversations with are the builders, right? The people who are actually building homes. And I've had those conversations recently. And as I'm talking to builders, the story that they're telling me over and over and over and over again is it's the regulatory process in Hawaii that makes it expensive to build. It's the studies. It's the fact that your neighbors get to weigh in on what you're building and where. It's the history requirements, and it's the restrictions on private property use that make it so difficult to build a home in Hawaii, right? That's where the problem is. And I can't help but wonder, in the context of this being 2023, if the fact that the county itself embezzled $11 million from their affordable housing fund might have some impact into why we're struggling to build affordable housing on this island.
And that was the affordable housing credits.
That's the affordable housing credits. Yeah, credits. Yeah, like seems to me that rather than regulating families who are just trying to make ends meet, maybe the county could pay closer attention to their own budget and pay closer attention in their own backyard before they start making the affordable housing problem our problem as individual families.
Right, right. And so you believe that one of the things that the county is dealing with, obviously, is our affordable housing crisis, and that they might be trying to use the available stock of Ohanas and ADUs to have people stop using them for short-term vacation rentals and have to take in long-term renters.
Yeah, and what's ironic about that is that the county has for a long time restricted your ability to put a kitchen in your Ohana or your ADU. And now they want us to convert them into local housing. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to convert it into local housing when the only thing you can cook on is a hot plate? So, I mean, there's really a disconnect there. And when you look at the broader scope of progressive cities around the world, right? So you look at Paris, and you look at London, and you look at New York, you look at San Francisco, and then you look at Tokyo, right? What you discover is that in every other location except for Tokyo, they've had a huge run-up in real estate prices, and they've had an inability to keep prices in line with earnings.
Right.
And so you have to look and say, okay, well, what's different about Tokyo than all these other communities all over the world? And what you find is that Tokyo has something called by right permitting, right? Which means that if a property is zoned multifamily, right, and even if all the houses around it are single family, and you want to build an apartment complex, your neighbors have no say. Your local government has no say. There is no input into it. As long as your specifications meet the safety and the requirements of the zoning, you can build whatever's within that zoning, right? And as a result, the number of housing units in Tokyo has kept up with the population growth in that community, whereas in communities like Palo Alto or San Francisco or New York City, where there's this big public input and all these commissions and all of this regulation, housing construction has come to a screeching halt because, of course, everybody wants their neighborhood to be exactly like it was the day you moved into it, right?
Yep.
I moved into this neighborhood and that lot was vacant when I moved in, and my kids play baseball in it, and come hell or high water, I don't care that you're allowed to do it, you're not going to build a house on that lot, right? And here in Hawaii, that problem's compounded by the fact that we have so many retirees, right? And retirees are people who retire to Hawaii, almost by definition, are people who've been fairly successful in their careers, right?
Right.
They understand how to work within local government.
Yeah.
They've got their piece of paradise.
Yep.
And damn it, they never want anything to change in their piece of paradise again. And they have the time and the experience to make that happen. NIMBYism. And so we as a community really need to work to make sure that if you buy a piece of property, right, that's zoned multifamily, and you want to build an apartment complex on it, you should be able to do that. And it should be very simple, a very simple, straightforward process that doesn't involve public input from 50 different agencies, right? If we can do that, we can solve our affordable housing crisis. But none of that has to do with restricting my ability to rent the downstairs of my own home to a family from New York City who just wants to come to Hawaii for a week.
Yeah. Do you guys all agree on this? Yeah. We got a bunch of people nodding their heads in the audience here. There is a zoning meeting, right? So a zoning meeting is coming up. It has been pushed around the country right now that zoning is creating the problem, right? And for all of us who grew up in America thinking, oh my gosh, if you take away zoning, then there might be some crazy crap that happens in all these different neighborhoods, right? Well, some of the crazy crap might be a fourplex, right? And you're right, you get the people saying, I don't want 4 people living on there, right? But on the real side of life, though, too, if everyone starts building fourplexes, can our roads handle it? Can the schools handle it? So there has to be some level of planning, right?
There does have to be a level of planning, but that's where places like, and I'm going to go back to Tokyo, come into it, okay? So when people ask me to describe living in Hawaii, I describe it very much as living in a Nordic state, right? It's like living in Sweden or in Reykjavik or in Denmark with all the regulation and all of the kind of socialization of a lot of the means of production, right? Like Matson's been granted basically an exclusive contract for shipping. Young Brothers actually has been granted an exclusive contract for shipping. And so you have a lot of the socialization of a lot of our infrastructure, but we get none of the benefits. So we pay all the taxes, but we don't get universal health care. We pay all of the taxes, but we don't get a social safety net. And going back to your point, we don't get effective public transportation, right?
Yeah.
We don't get, effective transportation for our schools. We don't get roads. I don't get water service. I don't get trash service. Heck, green waste is now shut down except for 2 days a week, right? And so we're paying, in the case of short-term vacation rentals, we're paying 1 out of every $5. We're paying a 20% tax rate, and I can't even get county water, right?
Yeah.
And so, we as a community need to look at the symptoms of growth and look at how to mitigate those. When you look at tourism, right? The issue with tourists is not necessarily that we don't like having tourists on our beaches, right? There's nothing wrong with a family setting up a tent and an umbrella and a cooler and enjoying the day at the beach. The issue is 75 people for 25 parking, or 75 cars for 25 parking spots, right? It's a traffic issue. Those are the types of things that the county could be addressing. The world that I see for the future of the Big Island in terms of tourist mitigation and making it more accessible to tourists would be an effective public transportation system that touches the airport, that touches Ali'i Drive, that touches Waipio Valley and some of the other attractions, right? And sets it up so that you don't have to rent a car when you come to our island, right?
Blasphemy from Hertz.
Well, I know. And, if you could set up a system like that, then the stops on the public transportation become the places where the tourists are focused, and the other stops on the public transportation become places where people can park and ride into work or park and ride into facilities. And that mitigates a lot of the complaints that you're talking about with infill development and higher density development, right? And so I view the county's job as not telling us what we can and cannot do. Managed economies don't work, right? Especially when the managers are completely incompetent, right? Well, they don't. I mean, look at East Germany. In East Germany, you had to get you used to have to get a permit to get an amplifier and a separate permit to get a guitar, and then you'd have to have a permit to play a concert, right? And as a result, where's the punk rock scene in East Germany? There wasn't one, right? It was in West Berlin where punk rock took off because anybody could go get an amp and a guitar and mash some music and scream into a microphone. And so, the regulatory environment plays a big important role here, and it's the county's job. It's the job of government to help to manage the effects of that growth, not to tell us what we can and cannot do, right? And so, and fortunately, this is America, and there's a bunch of it is, and if America has one religion, right, it's not Christianity. Okay. Americans' religion is capitalism. Yeah. Period. And so, we do have a lot of protections at the federal level, and, frankly, the county's current bill steps on those. Yeah. And in the case of the bill that was passed in Oahu recently, the federal district court came in and said, hey, you can't regulate this, right? A residential use is a residential use. If the person is sleeping there and cooking there, it's a residential use, whether it's a day or 3 days or a week or a month or a year. The county doesn't have the power to do this. Now, they can try, and they can create a bunch of legal bills for us, and they can create a bunch of legal bills for them. But at the end of the day, we have the right to use our residential property as residential property, independent of what the county thinks. And, we intend to assert those rights.
There you go. Okay. Also, for the people who are here, are you all aware of what they're thinking about doing? They're having that, you can't have more than 2 people in any bedroom in a house. So they're trying to make it so that you don't have 15 people coming over and partying in the house. So they're also going to tell you how many people can sleep in each bedroom too, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's pretty nitty gritty how much.
Well, they're asking for floor plans of our homes.
Yes.
Right? And, I can't help but think, so they recently launched a website, right? That's an unofficial county website, right? To talk about this issue.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to mention the URL because there's no privacy policy, right? It doesn't tell you who's behind the website, right? Yeah. The SSL certificate doesn't have the organization in it. And then they're asking for personal information. They're asking for names and emails, right?
Interesting.
So they set up this website outside of the county's own process. And I would hypothesize that the reason is because for them to set up a website through the county's process, they'd have never been able to get it done in the time frame for this thing. But the point of that is, in my view, a county that's going to do something like that can't be trusted with floor plans to my home, right? They're going to put all that on the internet. Do you really look at Hawaii County and say, they're going to keep my data safe, right? I don't want them to have a floor plan to my home. It's none of their business how many people are sleeping in my individual bedrooms. And in fact, visitors engage in all kinds of activities, and sometimes there's probably 3 of them in a bedroom, and that's okay. The county, it's really none of the county's business what we do on our property, provided what we're doing is within the zoning, and it's residential zoning, it's ag as residential zoning, and we have the right to operate the way that we choose to operate. And frankly, at our family, we've been very successful with that. So, we run a coffee farm.
Right.
And we currently sell way more coffee than we grow. Right. And the reason for that is because when people come to visit, we give them a sample of our coffee in their kitchen. And then we ask them several times during their stay if they want to buy another pound, and many of them do. And then we push on them to subscribe. Right. So I don't know what the percentage is, but it's like 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 subscribe. And then we send them a pound of coffee every month forever. Right? And so we're selling way more coffee than we're growing, because every time we get a vacation rental guest to come and stay, that's our opportunity to have a long-term subscription customer for our coffee. And so the vacation rental business becomes a sales channel for our agricultural business. And that's the type of creativity that free markets drive. Right? And so we need more of that here in Hawaii, not less of it.
Right. How would people who are interested in learning about this issue, and you don't want to say that website, but maybe joining up with other people who are concerned about this whole experience, how do they get together and figure this out?
So we've established a nonprofit. It's called the Ohana Aina Association. For those of you like me who are a little haole, that means the Family Land Association. And the goal is to advocate for families who want to host vacation rentals on their own property, or maybe own a second property on the island. And also to advocate for their service providers, because it's not just me as a landowner that's affected by this. We employ a full-time maintenance person who makes 3 times the median wage in Hawaii, and we also provide subsidized housing for his family.
Oh, that's right.
He's affected by this legislation. We employ 5 separate cleaning staff. Mm-hmm. Those cleaning staff are extremely well paid. Because we're a small family, and because they're providing minimum services, right? They're able to negotiate with us one-on-one and get a much better rate for their time than they would if they were negotiating with a hotel or negotiating with a big company.
Right.
And so they're very well paid, and they don't just service us, they service a bunch of other families as well. They'll be affected by this. So I'd encourage, if you're a service provider, if you're a homeowner, if you aspire to be a homeowner in this industry, to reach out at the Ohana Aina Association, at least join our contact list. And then as we're building this advocacy organization, it's going to take money. Folks can join the organization for like $100 a year. For many families, that's a lot, and we understand that. But for a lot of vacation rental operators, that's a pittance.
Right.
And
business.
It allows us to have a little bit of funding to spend to advocate on their behalf. And right now, actually, our total spending for the month of November was $6. So
$6.
we're not spending a whole lot, but there will be activities in the future where we're working hard to advocate for the industry, and we will need to do some spending. So.
There you go. Right. And you know what? That's called lobbying.
Yes.
So if you want to find out more, again, it's Ohana Aina Association. Is it ohanaassociation.com?
Yep.
Okay. And we'll drop that below in the comments as well. And you know what? You see the passion here. I know that from talking to other people in the this community, to lose the income from a short-term vacation rental will make them have to lose their home.
Yes.
Because they can't afford the mortgage. They bought the house because the mortgage was based on what they could make from outside income.
Yes.
And this could be, it's a private problem, private property problem.
And it's important to realize that if they do lose those homes, right, the new buyer is very likely to be somebody maybe on the mainland, right, maybe an international, maybe an investor, right? And so one of the potentials of this bill is taking those homes that are owned and occupied by local families and turning them into second homes that are sitting empty. I can only speak for my home. The home that we bought sat empty 51 weeks a year for more than 10 years because it was a billionaire's plaything. He came to go fishing once a year, and other than that, it sat empty. Now it houses us. It houses a vacation rental, and we employ 9 people total.
Yep.
We're active members of the community. Yep. That can go away if the vacation rental income evaporates. And if I were to say one thing about business, just business in general, I'm a former tech CEO, right? With Southwest Airlines starting to fly to Hawaii, the types of visitors that we're getting, right, are more middle-class families, right, who couldn't necessarily afford to stay in a hotel room for $1,000 a night and eat out at a restaurant 3 times a day, right? For those people to visit our island, they need a multi-bedroom house or a multi-bedroom facility that has kitchen facilities, and they're flying in on airplane after airplane after airplane, and they've got their money over there, and they say, please take my money. As a business person, I would advocate anytime somebody says, please take my money, you should take it. And so you should figure out a way to take it. And so we as a community should make sure that we're providing these people with what they want, because it's not just the vacation rentals they're spending money with, right? They're spending money at local restaurants.
Yeah.
They're spending money at local gift stores.
And farms.
And farms. They're doing tours. They're going to the manta ray excursions. They're the lifeblood of our community, and we want them here. We want to welcome them here, and we count on it.
Right.
If they go away, we starve.
Right.
So
Thank you.
Thank you so
bringing
much.
this up to us. And you guys, again, the West Hawaii Association of Realtors is working on this issue as well as this association. And if you want to get involved, definitely pay a couple bucks and get the information. And if this is going to affect you, please tell other people as well. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Thank you
with
so
that,
much.
be safe. Aloha.